Guys have ever experienced this? Well, you know, when you're speaking to native speakers, you suddenly get this look. And you'll just say, just like, oh, they haven't understood me at all. And it's like, oh, it's so embarrassing, right? So today we're going to talk about 3 reasons why this happens and what we can do to sort this out and change this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Will here. I'm a second year medical student at the University of Manchester, going into 3rd year now actually. I learned Mandarin to a decent level in about 2 years, and just on this channel I'm sharing, you know, some learning tips for both languages and for learning in general, and also going through productivity and meta learning as well, because these are the things that I'm interested in. I really hope you guys enjoy. If you like my videos, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Right, let's just get into what we're going to talk about today then. Okay, so the first reason you might get this look of shame of having completely lost the native speaker is probably because of pronunciation. So especially in Mandarin, some of the biggest problems are tones, consonants, and just generally butchering the kind of whole rhythm of the language. So we're going to go through how we can actually solve this problem and what are my tips for you guys. Now the tips today that I'm giving for pronunciation are predominantly for Mandarin Chinese. However, I do think they would apply to other languages as well. Firstly, I would say it's really important at the beginning of starting to learn a language that you spend a lot of time practicing pronunciation and getting the basics and the foundations in place, because it's a lot harder to change later down the line when you kind of run into the dreaded fossilization. So what we need to be doing is practicing individual words and then slowly working our way up to sentences, and then being able to do something like shadowing to be able to like imitate a whole conversation or paragraph, etc. Some of my tips for this are to actually learn the tongue positions and the mouth positions needed to pronounce all the words in pinyin, and to do so correctly. Now obviously this would be, at this stage, it would be really useful if you have a native speaker, friends who can help you do so. Even better, a Chinese teacher who's trained in pronunciation and can tell you very clearly how to do so and check that you're pronouncing it correctly. However, for a large majority of people, they don't have kind of the opportunity to do so. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a couple of videos that I used when I was first learning Chinese that I found really helpful, and the teacher explains the mouth positions very clearly, so I was able to quickly pick up a large amount of new sounds that I hadn't yet encountered before, because obviously a lot of sounds in Chinese don't actually exist in English. So I'll put them down below and you guys can check that out. Next, we're going to talk quickly about tones. This often becomes a very big problem for the large majority of learners. I very, very rarely meet anyone who speaks Mandarin well who actually has good tones, and that's purely because they're really hard to master, right? And a lot of people kind of think that they can just pick these up naturally through lots of listening. I'm yet to meet someone who has actually done this successfully. So what I would recommend doing is deliberate practice for tones every day. So what I used to do was I've put a video on this, so I'll put this up roughly, I don't know where it'll be, probably around here. What I would recommend doing is starting from just a single character and being able to identify the tone. So you can listen and you're like, oh, I know that's 4th tone. But that's a really good start. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work our way up to 2 characters, and then slowly up to a sentence. And we're going to go from just being able to identify the tone to actually being able to repeat it. So once we've got our tones down, one of the other things I would recommend doing is to regularly do shadowing. So if you're listening to your favorite podcasts in Mandarin, or you're watching, you know, a TV show, just take time every day to kind of copy and imitate what you're hearing regularly to try and improve your accent. Next, I would say any new words that you're learning, don't make the mistake of being like, oh, you know, I can read it, it's fine, or oh, I'm not too sure about what its pinyin is, it's okay. Like, don't be that person. You need to remember the pinyin for everything you're learning. And I would actually recommend, if you're putting stuff on Anki, as I kind of do, and it's one of my big parts of my own learning methods of using sentence mining, make sure that you're adding audio unless you're pretty sure your pronunciation is quite good. Otherwise, you're going to be getting into, when you're reading these sentences out loud, you're going to be getting into bad habits early on. And eventually, once that becomes muscle memory, it becomes quite hard to change. Finally, on the topic of pronunciation, I have one more thing, and that is get as much feedback from natives as possible. So I just used to get my Chinese friends to just correct me all the time. If I made like a tone mistake, and occasionally I still do now, like although it's a lot rarer, it does occasionally happen, I'll get them to correct me, and then I'll keep on repeating it until I get it right. So it's important to have this deliberate practice in place and to be aware of where you're making mistakes so that you can go away and practice those specific areas and solve them as quickly as possible. Now I'll give you an example here. So I used to say 到时候, okay, and 到 in this kind of situation should be 四声, it should be fourth tone. But I would, for whatever reason, I would be pronouncing it as third tone. So I spent a lot of time practicing 到时候 and then being able to use that in sentences, like using that, trying to make sure that I don't make that mistake. And eventually I was able to change that pretty quickly and solve that problem. The next kind of main reason that native speakers will struggle to follow you is because of the way you're thinking in the language is too closely aligned to your own mother tongue. So you're making the mistake of using, for example, I'm an English native speaker, and if I speak Mandarin using my English mind, if we want to call it that, or my English way of thinking, it sounds really strange and the word order will get messed up. And there'll be a few other kind of like 用词习惯, it'll be like the way I'm using words is just a bit weird. So what we need to be doing is actually training ourselves to try and think in the language that we're learning. Otherwise we'll have this problem, or we'll be trying to fit English grammar into Mandarin, and that doesn't really work. So just a few quick tips here. If you can, try and avoid translating. You know, I find it very helpful to use pictures or to use other methods to try and still make the connection in my mind as to knowing the meaning of a word. However, I won't just be like literally memorizing its English translation. I just don't really think this helps much. Also, again, I would highly suggest that everything you're learning in the context of a sentence, as a lot of the time, the context of a sentence and how the words used can really tell you a lot about the meaning in ways that just memorizing like what it means in English, or even memorizing a Chinese definition of an English word really can't. The last point I want to make is lack of logic. So sometimes if you're speaking for an extended period of time, so someone asks you like a really deep question or whatever, and you don't really have the logic in place, then this will mean that they're like, what on earth are you talking about? If you're jumping around to different points, this is the same in your own mother tongue, right? So it's something that just needs a lot of practice. It's something I'm still working on, particularly in Mandarin, because most of the conversations we have as language learners with native speakers tend to be quite basic, and they tend to be everyday things. And it will be, I say something and the native speaker says something or asks me a question back, and then I ask a question. We don't really have many opportunities, for example, to do speeches or to do, like, for example, when I was in the Mandarin competitions that I've done, I had to do a lot of speeches. I had to do like even a stand-up comedy, and I even had to like kind of say my opinion on things like Chinese medicine. And in this situation, your logic is really important. So it's something that's just worth practicing with native speakers if you can, if you have a need to do so. However, for most people, just having a basic conversation, you don't really need to worry about this aspect too much, but it can be something that throws off native speakers a bit if you're having a more in-depth conversation. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope it's been helpful for you. If you've got any questions or anything, please let me know down in the comments. 妈呀，我的英文怎么这么差? Okay, and then if you can, I'd really appreciate it if you can subscribe to the channel and let me know if there's anything you'd like me to make some more videos on. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.